600 subscribers special. I have 608 subscribers on YouTube. And of course, that means I have to make a cool video for you. No, just kidding. I would have made this video anyway. But I'm still very glad about this. And I just want to say that I want to maybe make my brand a little bit more obvious in the future, because I've seen some branding videos lately, and it might happen that I will split the YouTube channel into multiple channels to make it a little bit more separated, since I have a lot of different topics going on this channel. Like, if you know some of the old videos, there were even some videos where I just played Assetto Corsa, and in the newer videos there is also a lot of different stuff like testing audio plugins or having fun with audio plugins, and also plugin development, but also advertising my own plugins, and also discussions of certain concepts, sometimes even just programming concepts and nothing with VST development in particular. So it's kind of wild, so maybe I will split that up. And now let's get back to the actual topic of this video, which is this plugin that was just released. It is called Sweep, and or was it just released, or did I only noticed it some days ago and it was released way earlier already? I don't know. So first of all let's resize it to a huge size so that it kind of makes sense on when people watch it on phone screens. It cannot be made any bigger than this, but I think that's already pretty big. And what this does is it basically has a lot of filters, and they are moving around through the spectrum, and there are some parameters that determine the way in which they move and stuff like that. And then it sounds a bit like a phaser or like a flanger or something. And this is the break that I'm using it on. And now you might ask yourself why someone would use like something like a phaser on a drum break. And in order to show you that, I want to show you the context of the whole mix, and I will just turn it on and off and stuff like that. Okay, so I hope that you heard that, because it was quite a subtle difference. And I think the key idea here was that there are some, let's call them main drums, because they are kind of in the middle of everything. And then there is this break that is kind of in the background of the drums and giving it a little bit more of a natural vibe. And I think when you use phasers or like moving filters, like in this case, on something like a background break, then that's a very good way to just let them breathe a little bit. They will not only breathe in general, but it also adds a little bit of stereo width if you use the offset of the plugin. And that's something that you can do with phasers, and you can also do it with the new plugin Sweep, which is more like a shepherd tone thing. But all in all, it's pretty similar to how a phaser sounds. So let's just use these terms a little bit interchangeably in this context. And yeah, now I will just pretend like I have not used this plugin already and use it now, so that I can show you which parameters wait for you to use if you download the plugin or plan to do that. So this is how it starts off. I gotta say, one thing that always confuses me a little bit about the speed parameter is that I'm not really sure what unit this speed has. Like, is this a frequency or does it sync to the BPM? And if yes, then what are the values that it represents? For example, when I look down here, it says 0.10. Maybe it is just a frequency, then it's not synced to the tempo. And that's kind of confusing a little bit because it has a sync button. And I first thought that this, because it was next to the speed parameter, it would mean that this is tempo sync. But it actually just means that you can have an offset to the other channel, you know, left and right. And then it on different parameters of this plugin, you can now set an offset. Now this is very interesting in particular because you can let them run to the opposite directions, and it creates a very interesting sensation audibly. And yeah, that's something that you can do here, which is pretty cool. And also a very interesting mechanic to have the knobs like on top of each other. That is actually something that I also tried in my own plugin development things. And I decided against that because when knobs are too small, then it can be hard to actually touch the outer knob. And we can see the developer really used a non-rectangular hitbox, because if you are touching it outside of the, you know, the box, then it's not touchable. And these parameters also as well. So they were consistent with this circular hitbox. And that's why it works. But, well, you can resize the plugin so it's not a big deal. You can just make it huge and then it's easy to grab these. But that's just something to keep in mind when developing plugins, that it's not always cool when the knobs are on top of each other. But in this case, I would say it's cool. Well, the next thing that you can do here is, let's turn off this again to make it a little bit easier. You can change the amount of filters. It's hard to describe the sound of the difference. I mean, you can definitely see what the difference is. There are just more or less filters, but what is the actual difference in sound? I don't know. I mean, it's not that I don't hear a difference. There's definitely an obvious difference in sound, but I don't know how to describe the use case of it. It's just less filters make it more obvious where the actual frequencies currently are that are moving around, while having a lot of filters smears that a little bit. So you can only hear the direction of the filters without hearing where they are, where each of them is, because that would be kind of insane. So yeah, that's something that you can do. Now the next thing that is probably very prominent when you look at this GUI is that it has this EQ style pre-EQ thingy that kind of determines which part of the spectrum should be affected by the filters, and you can even turn on these. Now, one thing about these filters is they could have a little bit of a better workflow. For example, when I double click on them, they will not automatically activate, even though that is something that you often see in such EQ style thingies. So you have to actually go down here and activate them. But what they have is that you mouse wheel them to change the Q factor. So that's pretty cool. And for some reason you cannot mouse wheel on this thing. Now you have to actually grab the Q factor down here. You can do this. So some of the design choices in the UX of this plugin are a little bit questionable, but I mean, it's a free plugin, so we can't really be mad. It's just something that I say for the developers if they watch this, so that they can, I don't know, maybe make an update of this that makes it even cooler to use. Or just keep it in mind for the next plugin, I don't know. Also, sometimes when I'm grabbing these, they are not grabbable. Like only when I go really into the middle of it. So the hitbox of these things are also circular, obviously, and it's kind of annoying, especially when the UI is smaller and you kind of misgrab it a lot of times. So that's also something to keep in mind. Because as you have probably noticed, even when I'm turning up the UI size to this very unreasonable size that I only choose because I'm making a YouTube video, it's kind of very obvious that it's still easy to misgrab these things. But that's like not a serious bug or anything, because I like this plugin. I will definitely use it a lot, and I'm only saying these things because I want to make a complete review of the plugin. Now let's go on. There is this little Q factor thingy, and you can already see what it does. Now let's also hear how it sounds. Yeah, that's pretty cool. When you lower the Q factor, of course you don't hear the individual resonances a lot anymore. You just hear that there is some sort of EQ thing going on and it's kind of moving, but you can barely sense it anymore. And that's kind of cool because it sounds different than normally putting a bell, an EQ bell on something. I am pretty sure that you could also use this plug-in to just make some EQ bells sound a little bit analog or analog-ish or like pseudo-analog. I usually don't like the term analog for anything digital because it's kind of cringe that people always have to say, ooh, my stuff sounds so much like hardware, to just because they want to say it sounds good. Because something can sound good while being just plain digital. But when I say analog in this context, I mean analog in the sense of analog equipment can be a little bit random, and having filters move through the spectrum subtly maybe also gives a little bit of this randomness into the sound. So that's kind of cool, I guess. Not sure what the Q bias does exactly. I mean, I see that it does something, but I don't really see what exactly is its deal. But it does have a good feeling. I cannot explain what it does or why I'm using it, but it feels usable and useful. So that's pretty cool. Phase. Not sure. Okay, so my thoughts about this section of the UI is it's kind of weird that you cannot hear or see the difference between phase and complex without turning up random. So it could be made more clear by the UX that you have to turn up random in order to hear these effects. Because when you read this, you are just thinking to yourself, well, phase of what, and complex of what, and random of what. And of course, when you then dial in random, you can see the effect. The filters are kind of not linearly distributed from each other anymore, and also change in gain a lot and stuff like that. But still, what does complex do here? Not really sure. Maybe it's just different algorithms for what the randomizer does. And maybe it really increases complexity to something that can be represented by a number like 7 or 9. But it still doesn't really explain what the phase parameter is meant for here. So these parameters are very weird. I would say they need a little bit more explanation by the UX or by a manual. I will just ignore that for now. I can just say that there is a little bit of a problem with this complex parameter because very small drags already let it jump between the min and max value 1 and 9. You cannot see that now, but I'm moving the mouse very subtly and it still jumps from 1 to 9 like in an instant. And it makes it a little bit hard to dial in the soft values without holding sensitive drag. With a bit of more testing, the developer could have seen that. So I would say even for a free plugin, it seems a little bit rushed, as being seen on stuff like this. Now let's go on with the log lin knob, because that's actually a cool one. As you can see, the log lin knob kind of skews the whole filter frequencies more towards the end, so to the high end of everything. So you could theoretically just ignore using the low cut and only use the log lin knob to make the action go to the high end, and also change the distribution of frequencies between the filters and makes this distribution change throughout the spectrum, which has a very interesting sound effect. And this is a very easy to understand and easy to use parameter, and I like it a lot. But one thing I don't like about the UI, by the way, is that it's very easy and happens often that the visualizer gets out of its range on the y-axis. I don't know if it's possible to kind of change that without making it be too small on the normal values, but it's kind of annoying that there are so many settings that do sound good but do not look good. It's like not a breaking issue with this plugin, but that's also something that I would consider being not perfect yet. Okay, now the mix knob. It is just a perfect mix knob. You can dial it in 100%, 0% or anywhere in between, and it will always have the same volume. So this is just a very finely tuned mix knob that really compensates for whatever is going on in the plugin to make all of the mix values feel the same. And yeah, that's pretty cool. Now let's compare these settings. I found completely new settings that I also like, and they sound very different. I like these settings. They kinda remind me of the sensation that there is a very soft wind when going to the sea. And this setting sounds a little bit more alienated because you can really hear the ripples in the filters and stuff like that. It reminds you more of a trippy phaser. Let's listen to both of these settings in the context of the music. Actually, I think I like the new setting a little bit more. Let's use the new setting and then dial back the old setting to use both of them. And now that we have two settings, two different sweeps, the real question is, what is the AB when turning both of them off simultaneously? Yeah, that's pretty cool in my opinion. And that just shows that you cannot have enough of these kinds of plugins in your project. You might instantiate a sweep and think that's it, but if you just go for it and make another sweep and use that as well, then you just have even more sweep and it's even better sometimes, like in this case. And yeah, it really makes the drums feel more moving, especially when wearing headphones. And you should never forget the headphones, listeners, sitting in the bus or in the trains, just wanting to listen to music with a cool stereo field. Not everyone is sitting in the club. Sometimes people just chill and go to university or something like that, or ride their bikes. That's important too. And these are the kinds of plugins that do that. And that's why I think that this is a very valuable technique. And plugins like that enable you to use this technique. And this is how I end my 600 subscriber special.